Dave Fennessy is one of the leading Irish composers of his generation. And having talked to Catherine Hunker, the leader of the Irish Chamber Orchestra, I can tell you that the ICO are really excited to play Hirta Rounds again. Before I talk to Dave, I wanted to share a short story from the last time the orchestra played Hirta Rounds, which I think was at the Kilkenny Arts Festival. Now, of course, contemporary music is always heard with interest and curiosity, and sometimes, dare I say, because I know Dave's listening to me, a certain amount of scepticism. And this was no exception at the Kilkenny performance of Hirta Rounds for one of the parents of an ICO member. Now, after the performance, this lady in question, she said, "I wasn't expecting to enjoy that music, but my goodness, I really did." So, Dave, with that endorsement from an ICO parent, welcome to the Oboe Windfree show to tell us a little bit about Hirta Rounds. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Very nice to be here. I think maybe I shouldn't say anything from there on because I think I might just quit while I'm ahead. That sounds like about as good a review as I've ever had. So it's nice talking to you, and good luck with the performance.
That's it, finish. That's it. Over and done with. Well, the thing I really wanted to ask you, before we talk about the inspiration for the music, I wanted to ask you about the musical sound world of the piece. Because some of the musicians that I've spoke to about it, they the general feeling was that you've encapsulated sounds in this piece that are kind of impossible to write down for a string orchestra, but somehow you did write them down. And I know that you had most of your formal kind of music theory education a bit later on in your school career. And what I was wondering is, did the fact that you started to learn music a little bit later, did that impact on how you imagined sound?
I think it must have had a huge impact. And there's always a leap that goes from obviously the sounds that you have somewhere, a kind of a foggy version of something, an idea of something or a sense of what a piece might be like. And then it has to go through all these levels of distillation, you know, before it becomes something which you can hand over to other players. And I mean, with a piece like that, I did have a very kind of strong image about what the feeling of it might be like. So I knew, for instance, that it's for a standard string orchestra in many ways, 16 strings, but I really was strongly drawn to the idea of it being 16 players, so 16 individual people who are all kind of playing, they're speeding up and slowing down in a very kind of musical kind of way, but not stuck to some big dogmatic pulse from a conductor or something, because this piece is crucially done without a conductor. So I was really interested in this idea of 16 lines, 16 people, musicians who are kind of coming in and going out, and you might make a connection with somebody who's on the other side of the ensemble for a moment, and then you would pass again and you would drift apart, and then you'd be making a connection with somebody else. So that all the while that there's a kind of, I think I'd said it somewhere before, that in some ways it's at the same time one of the most complex pieces I've written and the most simple. It's a strange combination of both, because the material of the piece is extraordinarily simple actually, but the relationships and actually the way to try and, for me, to get it down on a page where I could still have all these freedoms and allow people to play in a musical way and bring their individuality to a line, that was really hard to do.
The next thing I wanted to move on to a little bit is the kind of emotional content of the music. And so obviously Hirta is a deserted island sort of in the North Hebrides, and your music really encapsulates that sense of loneliness and emptiness. I listened to the piece twice this afternoon actually, just kind of to understand it a bit better. And what I wondered was, what actually inspired you to write a piece about such a remote place?
A few different things and some serendipity. And first of all, I was lucky enough to go there to St. Kilda years ago, 10 years ago, maybe more. And just landed there and was there for a day. And it's just it's a completely unique place. This rock in the middle of the ocean feels like, there's no trees growing there, very barren. And this street, with these old stone houses, which are all abandoned. Mm-hmm. And you're just really, really struck sitting there by this sense of abandoned community. So a kind of once thriving place with lots of people, and I was smallish, but small community, all of their trials and tribulations, their ups and downs, and their lives and loves, and everything that goes on in a society, which mm-hmm. was then evacuated very suddenly. So in the 1930s, so that there's this sense of something which was there and then which is left, the kind of humanity part of it, but then also at the same time you're really aware sitting there that you're just on this rock that probably looked exactly the same 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago.
Well, I was wondering, you said about how Hirta was evacuated, and actually it was evacuated because of the 1930 flu pandemic. So in these current times, all this confusion of the coronavirus and everything, I kind of wondered, as you revisit the piece, through thinking about it again and knowing that it'll be performed again and talking about it, does it mean the same as it meant when you wrote it, or do you kind of think of it differently?
Yeah, pieces always change, I think, depending on your distance from them. I was thinking about it definitely with reference to everything that's happening now. And one of the interesting things I think about the piece, which is inbuilt in it, is actually it's written in the front of it that it should be, when it's performed live on a stage, that the players should take up as much space as possible on the stage. Mm-hmm. So they actually are much more spread out than they would normally be in an orchestral setting. And this was also to do with this kind of driving home the notion of the individual within the group, even though they're playing a lot of the same material, that you can kind of, even in a live setting, you can choose even to focus on one of the violins. So there's no hierarchy in the piece. And this notion of individuals who are spread a little bit out and how you communicate at a distance, that's definitely something which is pretty pertinent at the moment. And there's lots of kind of secret signals within the piece, and it's really an attempt by all of these multitudes of voices to make connections across a kind of a chasm of some kind, even within the piece. Mm-hmm. So to me, that kind of stuff really does take on an extra layer of meaning, and it makes, I'm really chuffed actually that the orchestra are doing it now, because I do think of it's definitely a kind of a recurring issue, I think, in my music, my chamber music, which is about this hierarchy within an ensemble, and who's leading and who's following, and how can you be an individual, and how do you express yourself in a musical setting but also make a kind of a big full sound as an orchestra. So and a lot of us musicians are really finding it now. You realize how much you miss the richness of that, making a connection with another player. Playing a note, playing just two notes in harmony with somebody else, and the buzz that gives you, and releases all of these things in you, that and the sense of loss that we have, that we can't have them.
It's really nice to talk to you. I'm very sad that I can't actually get to meet you properly, because I'm sure we'd have great conversation. So thank you very much for taking the time.
I hope we can some point in the future. It would be really nice.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Dave. I'll speak to you soon. Although we are sad to have to announce our October concert cancellation due to level 3 COVID restrictions, we are thrilled to share our full-length concert online. The ICO will record this concert, which will be broadcast from Thursday the 22nd of October at 5 p.m, with tickets available now for purchase from www.irishchamberorchestra.com. Thank you very much for watching. Keep safe, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.